Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.
Hello and welcome to this bonus episode of Farming Focus, the podcast for Southwest farmers brought to you by Cornish Mutual. I'm your host, Peter Green. Today, we're back assessing farm health and safety with my guests from last week, Jane Gurney and Cornish Mutual's Dom Jones. And we're going to talk about shifting the culture when it comes to safety on farm. Jane, I'll come to you first. Great to talk again. We often speak about farm safety culture, but what do you think needs to change for safety to be taken more seriously all year round and not just during Farm Safety Week or even just during a harvest period?
It's really easy to be overwhelmed, and we should really stop and think. And I really do like the idea of having a thought pattern with a portfolio, so you've got that best practice. Your personal opinion should never override the law. I think is something that we, as farmers, myself included, should always be thinking, that we're not cutting corners because that's convenient for us.
Really useful thoughts. So, Dom, I mean, in the main episode, we talked a little bit about the fact that the stats don't seem to move that much. From your point of view and from Cornish Mutual's point of view, do you see the attitudes shifting at all?
Yes, I think gradually we do. There's definitely more willingness to talk about safety in a practical way, especially around, yard safety, family safety, and making sure everyone understands the why, not just the rule. There's still a minority view of, this is just farming. But the direction of travel is positive. More people are recognizing that the biggest risks are predictable and therefore preventable. I think one of the nicest things from my side is there's not one demographic that takes it more seriously than the other.
Right.
We assist a wide range of ages, and that's really good to see.
Yeah, fantastic. And are there particular areas where there's perhaps more engagement from farmers or they're more proactive than others, whether it's machinery or livestock or with training or with setting things up when there's a new implement or a new bit of infrastructure? Or is it perhaps with involving family or staff? Are there any areas that they really do seem to be running with particularly?
Yeah, I'd say we're seeing more proactive thinking in a few areas. I think training and refreshers on high risks bits of kits like telehandlers and ATVs. We're seeing a lot more of that. We're looking at traffic management, keeping pedestrians and vehicles apart, and absolutely involving family and staff more deliberately. So it isn't all on one person's head. I think there's a really nice trend coming through where business owners are getting their children involved from an early stage to take ownership, so that when eventually that business owner moves on, they know that that farm is going to be run in a safe way. I'm also seeing better engagement from maintenance routines and inspections, and a lot more attention to lone working. Not necessarily with fancy systems, sometimes just with better check-in habits and clearer boundaries for high-risk jobs. We have one member that I can think of that it does spring to mind, that they actually developed their own app for conducting vehicle and machinery inspections, which is definitely a special case, but you can sort of get the idea.
How cool's that? Fantastic. Gosh, the engagement there must be, right. That must be certainly a record high. Interesting to hear you talking about taking health and safety seriously and assessing risks. Almost, I'm reading between the lines here a little, but as part of a succession conversation, almost, if you're going to be serious about taking this business on, which can be really dangerous at times, you need to be serious about the risks that come with it as well. So that's a really, really interesting angle. Jane, do you think there's a reluctance still in farming to talk openly about the near misses and the mistakes?
It's quite interesting you would say that, because we were having a discussion, and one of our thought patterns was that everyone has got a story to tell. So has it become clever to have these near miss stories and, how things happen and so forth? And I find people work in stages. We have people who are working on a farm, often operators. They've got a real gung-ho sort of attitude, and don't interfere with us because, but if there's an incident, their whole family's life relies along that. They're often in a tied cottage, they've lost their job or they're injured, or they're no longer, they've lost their home and everything has gone. They're going to be the first people to stand up and say, hang on, why didn't we do this better, or why didn't we take much more notice? So there is that. We also find that we engage with a lot of estates. So farm workers, we're looking at the farm manager rather than the owner. We're also seeing a lot of engagement with smaller farms. And I wouldn't say that one is better than the other for us. We've got really pretty much across the board, different sized businesses are engaging with the tilly. And that's great about it. So we can do this, or we could do it big, or we could do 2 trailers that are 25 years old or 15 years old, rather than the new kit that someone's got on a bigger enterprise. But what we do need to really, really do is to make sure that people are not listening to unqualified help, and that we aren't having on-farm unqualified maintenance, because that is a biggie for us. We'll often have someone who's employed on the farm at general jobs, and they really love the workshop and they're in there. Now suddenly they're maintaining the kit. They're now responsible for the peers, that everybody is looking at them. And they're absolutely were never employed or qualified to do that job. And we need to be really careful that we are doing what we're employed to do and what we're qualified to do. That will make a huge difference on the farms.
Yeah, absolutely. And you rightly alluded to that in the main episode last week. Really good to hear that point made again, that we just mustn't rely on people and put pressure on people to do a job which actually we haven't given them the skills or qualifications to do. We can all agree that health and safety is really important, but farming is so busy, and I think we talked in the main episode about the risks that we have to manage. It's so pressured. What do you think, Dom, stops those good intentions from being turned into action?
I think, as I mentioned on the main episode, it is time pressure and fatigue. You're trying to keep everything moving. You're trying to keep your business running, and the job changes by the hour. And it's so easy to fall back onto old habits, especially when you're on your own. That's where shortcuts start to creep in, and that's where incidents occur. Good intentions don't necessarily fail because people don't care. They fail because it's not built into routine.
Coming back to what you said a moment ago, Jane, just made me think about people working all hours and having these stories about near misses. We've heard on the podcast in a number of different episodes. I think most recently when we spoke with Wendy Nicholas about the Baroness Batter's profitability review, she talked about how her generation quite often wore this kind of "I work 80 hours a week" as a badge of honour. Do you think that need to work all hours, which can lead to fatigue, is one of the obstacles to actually turning those good intentions into action?
Yeah, I think we do. I think we definitely think the days are short. We're out there. We're doing what we can do. We know chasing the dark. We come in. Now we can anticipate. We're going to spend the whole evening trying to float the boat by doing the bookwork and to fill the paperwork in and answer the emails, put ourselves under immense pressure. And I think that's where our mental health really falls down. And we've got another month before we start to see more light. And enough to be able to push ourselves forward. But it becomes very repetitive, very samey, and it is so depressing to think everything is falling around us and we're not making any progress at all. And I think that becomes overwhelming, and you can't expect anybody to be thinking about safety and making improvements if they're absolutely under so much pressure that they can barely operate from day to day. And that's where agriculture is at the moment, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right to mention that things can always seem more difficult when we're in the depths of winter and in the dark days. We're recording this episode at the very end of January, before spring really feels like it's coming around the corner. So, Jane, from your experience, what's one simple change that can really start to shift behaviour on a farm to move that culture forward?
Ask for help. There's so much help out there. Just ask for help.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to ask now on the phone, text messages, just drop a direct message on social media. Just ask people for help. Say, can you help me?
And so, as you said in the main episode, that doesn't necessarily need to be colleagues. That can be manufacturers. It can be you guys at tillypass.co.uk. It can be the farm safety organisations as well. Those are the sorts of people you're talking about us getting in touch with.
Yes.
Great. And Dom, from a risk management point of view, what's one habit that you'd really love to see become just normal practice across farms?
I think if I could pick one, it would just be taking a short pause before you start any high risk activity. Just a 10-second check. Am I rushing? Is this bit of kit safe? Is there anyone around me that could potentially put in danger with what I'm about to do? Does someone know where I am and what I'm doing? It sounds really simple, but when you're time pressured and you're trying to get a job done, that small little reset can absolutely stop something going wrong.
Yeah. And that's really interesting to hear you say that. So we've got a very small suckler beef operation here. We outwinter our cows. And when I go out to see them, the field that I'm going to is usually pretty wet, pretty muddy. There's lots of opportunities for slips and trips out there. I'm a lone operator. Sometimes it's dark when I'm out there, and actually I always make sure that I've got my phone on me. I always make sure that I'm wearing my high vis, and I always make sure that I let my wife know what I'm doing, where I'm going, and when to expect me back approximately. She knows to give or take 50%, but she does also know that if I'm not back after a longer period of time, then she needs to get in touch with me on my phone. Really, really great tips. Thank you so much, Jane and Dom, for joining me on today's bonus episode of the Farming Focus podcast. It's been brilliant to talk with you about farm safety and to get your thoughts again.
Cornish Mutual, farming insurance experts.